P Street Garage. I'm back on the Mercury today. In my last video, you saw that I actually got this engine to fire. So that was a happy time. I know I've got a good engine. So I've decided to walk away from that. I think I had mentioned that I was going to jump inside and do some electrical. I decided against that because I do have a lot of switches and bulbs and stuff that are on order. And my light switch, my floor switch for the high beams. I decided to leave that alone and to address my biggest issue that I'm having, and that is the clearance issue of this engine conversion. So what I did, because the bell housing was touching the firewall, I decided to bring everything forward a little bit. So I jacked the engine up and I removed the mounts and I shimmed them forward a little bit. I've got some washers here. So I basically moved the engine forward about 1/4 of an inch. Now, that helped a little bit with the firewall, but when I jacked the engine up in place with the transmission mount, the transmission was rubbing. So what I decided to do is I bit the bullet and I chopped into my firewall, which is something I was reluctant to do, but I did. I cut a notch. I just nibbled away a little bit until I could see, and I could see what was touching and what wasn't. I'm obviously going to clean this up a little bit better, because I'm going to have to make some kind of a patch to fix that up. Now, I'm also in the process of trying to figure out a floor shifter. So I've cut another hole in my tunnel. I knew I was going to have to cut a hole in the tunnel. I just really did not want to have to do that. Not that it's not hard doing that. It's welding a piece and fabricating a piece to go back in after. That's the hard part. So what I've got now is I had a couple of old shifters that one was given to me, one came with the car. They're both basically kind of the same thing. I'm kind of going with this one here right now. And I've cut my hole, and what I want to do, just trying to fit this in. Trying to see if I can make this work for my automatic. Then, of course, I could go park, reverse, neutral drive. I'm just going to adjust the tabs, bend them a little bit. I did order my carpet kit. So my carpet kit, and I ordered the kit for a floor shifter. So I don't know if I'm going to have more material bunched in one area or not. We'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it. Worst case, I'll lay it flat and I can wrap this and maybe a vinyl boot or something. Or anyway, I've done this before and it worked. Only problem is I did this before in a pickup truck. And there's a lot more room in a pickup truck than there is in a small car like this. So it's a tight fit under there, but if I can get the linkages hooked up, I'll have to manufacture some kind of a rod. But my first step is to mount this solid. Not too bad. Kind of centered. Would work. I'd be able to reach it from here, I think. I could always extend it, make it a little bit taller, make it come out this way. Make it my own. But that's where I'm at right now. I've got the transmission. I've got the transmission fully hooked up. I got all the bolts. My light just died, so it's not going to be very good footage. But I've got the transmission mount and rubber and cross member is all in and aligned. So this is where the transmission is going to live. Happy with this alignment. I've got a little bit of the firewall cut. So the bell housing is no longer touching the firewall. Now, not out of the woods yet, because in the front, like I said, I did pull the engine about 1/4 of an inch this way. I could always push it back. I'm sure there's enough give in that transmission mount, but I'm going to try to leave it like this. I brought the engine about 1/4 of an inch this way, and now I still have the same issue I had with my starter, because if you remember, I showed the starter before. That's where the starter lives right there. I took the starter out, but where the starter is, right there. You can see that there's a steering linkage here. And with the old school starter, that linkage rubs the starter. I did a little bit of research, and I think you can get a more modern starter, as in a starter that would fit something like a 94 or 95 Mustang. I believe the body of those is smaller. So I'm thinking I'm going to go that route so I could alleviate some problems there. Also, my front pulley, right there. You see how my crank pulley is close to this, excuse this strap in the way, this torsion bar. You see this torsion bar? I mean, we're talking not even a quarter of an inch. So everything to do with converting this old straight six car to a V8, it's obviously doable, but almost what you need to do is, it's like the engine has to be lifted at the front and tilted at the back. So lifted at the front, I may come back underneath my mounts and shim them up. I can do that. I could put some washers under there, lift this up about quarter of an inch, half an inch, maybe nibble a little bit more at my firewall. No harm done there. That would clear my starter. It would clear this torsion bar. And hopefully it would not throw off my transmission mount and my transmission shifter that I'm going to attempt to put in here. So that's where I'm at. I put the electrical on hold. I got a good working engine. I just got to get the fitment right on this thing. Because if I don't, it's one thing to have a running engine. If it doesn't fit in the car, it's no good. So that's where I'm at now. We'll check in a bit later, see if I've made any progress. Okay, so it's a little bit later. I've got my my little makeshift shifter installed. So this is going to work. I think this will be all right. Park, reverse, neutral drive, and then low gear. I think this will work. Maybe do something like, I'll have to build maybe just a rubber boot or something, or pleather. Maybe something like this. Maybe put the letters on there. Anyway, this kind of goes like that, I think. I might have this on the wrong, no, something like this. Anyway, just some ideas. I think this will work. I might not even use any of this. I might just have a rubber boot and just tie it down like this. And then what I've done in the past is just use the existing shifter that was on the column and fasten it in here somehow. And anyway, so I got a shifter in place. My transmission is clearing, and the shifter linkage is clearing, not hooked up, but clearing. So some more metal work to do after. What I'm doing now, since I'm in this vicinity, I'm looking at this gas pedal. And the gas pedal is jammed solid. And the reason for that is because in the old straight six, had a linkage like this. And this linkage basically hung down like this, and it grabbed the gas pedal on the bottom and pivoted on. This was mounted to the transmission, and then this was attached to the carburetor. So like this. So obviously none of this is going to work in this car, because the rod for the rod is pointing straight down. It's jammed against the transmission. So I'm going to have to remove the gas pedal assembly, somehow flip things around so that this rod is pointing up. Maybe bend it so it points this way. Maybe reuse this and attach it. It has to point up and pivot, and it has to pull on this. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm going to remove this bracket for the gas pedal and see if I can get this gas pedal figured out. Okay. Here's my gas pedal assembly linkage. So this is the pedal in the car. You push. This is fastened to the firewall. And this rod here that's hanging down, I got to somehow heat this up and make it point upwards so that when I push my pedal, it pulls from the top. It's going to be a little bit tricky. Let's see if I can gear something up. Well, for whatever reason, it doesn't happen very often, this little job was actually easy. So I removed the linkage, like I mentioned. This arm was pointing straight down for the straight 6 application. I bent it 180 degrees, so it's pointing up, and I flattened it out this way. So now basically my gas pedal, when I push the gas pedal, it'll be like this. So it'll be like this, pedal up, and then when I push the gas pedal, it'll give gas to the engine because it will pull back on this. So of course there's return springs and everything. There's a spring that goes here that I have somewhere, don't know where, but anyway, this might work. It might not, but it might work. Okay, I'm going to leave this one here for now. And see what I'm going to jump into next. Not 100% sure. Okay. Okay, well, it's the next day. Freezing cold out. Just going to continue this video. Yesterday you saw me hack up the firewall here on the Mercury. And it's all about getting clearance for this engine. I'm going to show you what I'm going to do right now. Okay, so yesterday, firewall, the hacking and all this. And basically another thing I showed was how this front crankshaft pulley is basically rubbing on this torsion bar. This is literally millimeters from this. So what I've done right now is I've got my jack set up. I've got a block of wood under the oil pan, and I've got the engine lifted up. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to make this engine fit in the best way I can. I've already explained how I've got the transmission mounted. Obviously, the lower the engine sits, the better it is for the transmission. But the lower it sits, I have a starter that rubs, and I have a crank pulley that's basically touching a torsion bar, and we just can't have that. So what I've done is I've jacked the engine up, and like I've explained before, this is a two-piece mount. This is a two-piece mount. I don't know if you can see that. I'm not sure. This is the main rubber mount with the big bolt, and then the little angle bracket is now clear and lifted off the engine. And what I'm going to do is that bolts into the saddle, which is underneath. This is the saddle here. So you see this gap right here. That's how much I've got the engine lifted. So the whole point is I'm going to put washers under there, and I'm going to try to make some shims to bring this engine up. So what I'm doing at the same time is I've got to, because I set this up here yesterday, with the engine jacked up, of course, this changes everything here. So now I'm just going to double check to see, and it looks like my shifter still has a nice full range of motion, and it's not touching anything. And I can also see that my firewall, obviously I never would have been able to jack it up this high because with all the clearance I had yesterday when the engine was down, everything is touching again. But that's okay. I've got this engine lifted up way more than it has to. It's just in order for me to get under there and get the shims in place. So that's the project for today. Figure out how much I can lift this engine by, and see if I can just lift this up enough and set it back down in the cradle just so that this pulley never comes in contact with this torsion bar, and so that I'm able to use the old school starter since I already have it. The newer starters, like I said, are much skinnier, so that would alleviate that problem potentially. but they're also a couple $100. So if I can do this, clear that pulley, my shifter still works. I may need to nibble a little bit more at the firewall, so be it. So let's see how this goes. Okay, so this took no time at all. You can see the space that I have here now, right here. Right between this angle bracket and the cradle. That's how much I've got the engine lifted by. So what I did is I just took some washers like this. I took 7. So this is how much I lifted the engine by. Just eyeballing it. Not sure if it's going to work, but you can see now that I've got a nice clearance between the crank pulley and the torsion bar. I think this is fully acceptable, whereas they were basically rubbing before. I think this is a nice space. So I've got the engine pulled forward a little bit, moved up a little bit. The shifter is nice and free to move. And the firewall, nothing is touching there. So hopefully I'll be done with the hacking and I could move on. If this is good, maybe I could try to hook up the linkage to the transmission, see if I can figure something out with that. Okay. Okay, so now that I've got the engine jacked up, I'm just looking at the transmission fitment, and I thought I would try to see how I could tie the transmission linkage to my shifter that I just installed. So I took this off of the car. This is the original lever for the column shifter, and I think I might try to reuse this. It's the same kind of fittings on the end. So there's one end that could go in with a cotter pin, and then this other end here, same idea. This goes in with a cotter pin, and there's a little bit of an adjustment here. So I was thinking if I could repurpose this old piece, that this used to sit vertically at the firewall, and this is what moved the transmission linkage for the old column shift. But if I could reuse it this way, yeah, it'd be kind of good. So let's take a look underneath. So I'm under the car right now. It might be hard to see. This up here is the where is it? This one here. This is the transmission shifter. And this is my floor shifter. So, if I could somehow use this little rod, let's see, get you back down here, if you can see. If I can somehow use this little rod like this, if I can stick this up in here like this, so that one end hooks the transmission, then this other end, the adjustable, I could tie this into the shifter and snug it down, and then maybe I'd be able to shift my transmission this way. So, it's a trial. We'll see how this goes. Not a great location to be working, but I'm going to see if I can hook these up. And if I can make this work, then that's a pretty good cheap solution. Okay. Okay, so a little bit of fiddling later, and I was able to use that linkage underneath, and it's not perfect, but it looks like I've got park, reverse, neutral, drive. Now there's a little bit, this got a little bit flopsy in here. I'm going to have to see about retightening this back up. I do have another one if I can't solve this one, but I do have the linkage bent and fit underneath. I reused the old linkage, and so this, so I've got gears now. Park, reverse, neutral, drive, low gear. Okay, I'm going to end this here for now. I'm going to try to make my videos not as long. This is just some little stuff I was picking away at. I'm hoping to jump back into the dash into some of the electrical. I've got some parts from Rock Auto that are due today. So I'm going to call this one for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. That's all for now.